Hi, I'm Max Fashion, welcome back, and today's video is going to go over the jacket, apron and train, and hat to finish off this ensemble of my inquiry project design for my second term module. This entire video is just going to be voiceover as well as showing a whole bunch of pictures of the process. I don't have a lot of actual video showing the entire sewing process. There are bits and clips here, but for the most part it's just pictures that are going to be transitioning to show the steps and the process that I went through, and then voiceover to accompany it. So without further ado, let's get started, shall we? Let's get right into the jacket, shall we? First thing was first, I had to make a new toile out of calico, something a little bit more structured because the blue taffeta was being stretched out quite a significant amount, so I knew that my measurements were going to be slightly off if I went with a pattern strictly from that blue toile that I had made earlier. So this is just the front and the back out of the calico, and it was sitting a lot nicer on the dress form. It wasn't doing weird stretching, and then I was able to get on with the real fabric in the black taffeta and start cutting out all the stripes and the chiffon. Once everything was done, I was able to get the black taffeta cut out and start working on the front of the jacket, the most time-consuming part of this jacket, might I add. Once I was able to get the blouse figured out, I got the button stand on. It went on really nicely. Here's button placement where I wanted the buttons and buttonholes to go. And once I got the buttonholes sewn on and I cut them open, I realized they were very, very tight. The buttons were not going through, so this was scrapped, and I opted for a hook and eye and snap closure in the front. It doesn't look any different than what it would have looked like if it was a true button-up, but I had to sacrifice doing actual buttons. Moving on to the back of the jacket, I had to figure out how the pleats were going to get laid with this particular taffeta because it didn't have stretch, unlike the blue, it did, but it went really well. And then there was lining that had to go underneath it, so I sewed on everything that needed to get sewn on permanently, put the lining on so you don't see any of the top stitching through the bottom. And this short little video is just the placement of the two back stripes and the back pleated bit that has the stripes sewn in on the inside of the pleat and the lining. Next was sleevel hell, and I tell you, these sleeves did not want to cooperate. As you can see, my right sleeve was doing very nicely, while my left sleeve was doing this wonky, crazed bit. So after some figuring out, I realized that one of the seams was in the wrong place, and I fixed this by just lowering the seam and redoing the gathering, and it looks a lot nicer now. As you can see in this picture, they are hanging beautifully, and I was very pleased with the outcome on sleeve placement. Once that was done, I was putting on the ruffles. This was just me deciding whether or not I wanted to do purple chiffon at the end of the ruffle or not. I asked the designer. We went with the purple, and you'll see later on. Here, to start finishing off the actual jacket, I made a collar, and this is still just tacked on or basted on because I don't know whether or not it's going to be a butt-up collar or a lapped collar. But that was the jacket, and I am very pleased with how it turned out thus far. Now for the apron and train. The apron really wasn't all that hard. It was mostly just deciding on what we wanted to do for finishing it off. So I had three different examples that I went with. They were a pleated version, a chiffon, and just a regular bias bound edge. And here are the three different ones. We ended up going with the box pleat, and it does look very nice. It ties in with the skirt. Part with the apron, it was time to work on the train. This train was 3 meters long, but it was going to be bustled up in a particular way that the designer wanted. So this was just me cutting it out and then starting the draping work. So this was the first option that I went with, and I am very pleased with this one. I sent this off along with these two other ones. This one was just a regular sort of bustled up Polonaise style with a train on the ground. The next one was a Mantua style where I just pulled it up in the middle after I did the pleating on that previous one. And I sent those off to the designer. She chose on the first simplistic one. She just wanted more bunching, so that's exactly what I did. And it turned out really, really nice. The back is beautiful. It has this great drape, a lot of texture without doing a lot of unnecessary gathering and pulling work with tapes. From the side, it's very elegant and has that same amount of texture that you would see in the back. So after I had all that done, it was time to just work on finishing everything off. So this is me working on the apron, just putting on the Petersham band so everything lays flat against the corset and the body. And this is what the result was with the jacket on top of it. It looks really nice, and there's a purple flounce that was added to the entire hemline of the train. To finish off the look, we had a hat and veil ensemble to go with. So I did a cardboard mock-up. This was based off of sort of two different styles, one that had a point in front, which a lot of morning caps did have, and this asymmetrical hat that I also had found was a combination of these two. So this was just a cardboard mock-up from both sides and the front. After that, I made it out of buckram, so that way it would have a lot more structure and support. Looking back, I could have made it slightly differently. This is a bit of a mess. It was very sturdy, but it didn't have a lot of movement. But in the end, it is what it is. I don't have a lot of experience with hat making, but I'm pleased with the final outcome. So after it was done in buckram, it was time to drape the fabric over the hat, and that was easier said than done. The crown and the top of the hat were pretty easy. I added a bit of piping just to soften the edge a little bit. But getting that main brim fabric around was the trickiest part because I had to, drape it, wrap it, pin it, and figure out everything. It was complicated. But after that was done, I started fiddling with how I wanted to decorate the hat. So I did a box pleat sample and then this bow sample thing. I ended up ditching the bow. I thought it was too much, and considering a veil was going on it, it would just hide the bow indefinitely. But I did go with this box plate. I think it was really nice. It softens up the edge and it gives a little bit more whimsy to the character. So this was the final product of the hat without the veil. I was very pleased. I think it's going to be a nice addition to it. I do need to add in a hair comb still or get some hat pins. I don't know how the model will feel about having hat pins put in. They've never really worn them before, so a hair comb is probably going to be the best option for this. Unless it just stays on her head magically, in which case I won't need it. But here is the veil finished and sewn onto it. I just quickly whipped it onto the back of the hat because there's not a lot of stress that's going onto it. That's the back. It sits very asymmetrically and it looks beautiful when it is with the jacket. And here we have the final result. So this is just a close-up of the top half with the hat. I'm very pleased with how this turned out. I was not expecting half of the troubles that I had to go through with the apron and the jacket and having the blouse front not cooperate at times. It's still not doing everything that I want it to do. There's some bits that are sort of poking out with the raw edge of the fabric because I didn't have enough seam allowance. So there would be things I would do differently, but overall, this is a really nice look. I think it captures the original rendering from Anne Curry very well, and I would love to see this in a stage production. I'm very pleased with it. I think it is stage ready at this point, minus the collar. And that brings us to the end of the video. As you can see, I am quite pleased with how the final result came out. There are a few finishing details that still need to happen. The collar is still just pinned on with straight pins. I will end up basting this in place before my final fitting with my model, just because I don't know how the designer is going to want it, whether or not she wants it to be lapped over itself or she just wants the two edges to butt up. I have them butting up right now. Hooks and eyes will probably have to come in play just to keep it secure. Even if it is lapped over, a hook and eye will just keep it flat against the neck. So that needs to be finished. Everything else is pretty much done. I'm very happy with how the bustle train came out. There originally was supposed to be enough where it would swoop around to the side, but when I had draped it up, there was only about 22 inches left on the ground to train behind. So the designer said just bustle it up all the way and just have it touch the ground if it's only going to, train back 22 inches. I could have made it longer. I had 4 meters, but even then, this still would have had to been bustled up enough where no one would be stepping on it behind her, and it just was not a thing that I wanted to deal with. So I made it 3 meters, bustled it up, did that, and it looks fabulous. I'm very pleased with it. And I don't really care what anybody else has to say. I'm happy with it. I think the work on it has been tremendous. It forced me to use a lot more theater techniques, which I don't really use a lot in my everyday practice. I used a lot more of overlocking, a lot more electric machine versus hand sewing and taking the time to source out other fabrics. Everything on this besides the purple chiffon and the burnout fabric, those two were silks. Everything else was polyester. Usually I would use all natural fiber. So that was a little bit unnerving to work with, I guess you could say. I don't really know how to explain it. I personally just don't like working with polyester fabric. It's hot, they will melt if too hot of a temperature of an iron is set onto it, and it's just fussy to work with, in my own biased opinion. But that is the end of this. Like, subscribe, comment on whatever you liked in the video, and my final video will be an overview of the entire process. So I will have pictures from the half-scale models, I will have pictures of the toile laid out, all the pieces, and go in depth, and that will most likely be a 2-part process only because I get 15 minutes allotted to this. This isn't my job like other YouTubers where they get 20 minutes or an hour or however much time they want because they're making money off of it. I'm doing this as a personal thing and to document my process from my module. So without further ado, thanks for watching and stay tuned for the final review.